Hello and welcome to People Who Work with People, giving you the skills to work with real people on real issues in real time and in the real world. Today we're going to look at experiential learning, what it is, what it isn't, and why it's absolutely vital if you want to learn skills to work effectively with real people. Let's get started. Just the other day, I got an email from a woman who works in human resources, a director, and she asked a question which I found quite intriguing. She said, how is it possible that in the training that you offer, you can offer experiential learning online? How is it possible? Now, it drew my attention that, not that she thought it was or wasn't possible online, but it highlights the fact that a lot of people, when they think about experiential learning, they think outward bound, they think adventure holiday, they think about going up mountains, coming down mountains, climbing trees, creating rafts to cross rivers, and generally having a great time in the great outdoors. It's all about having big, impactful experiences, but of course has very, very little to do with the actual work, of the detail of working with people, of understanding people in detail, of, if you like, some of the subtleties involved in that. So when I'm talking about experiential learning, I'm really not talking about the great outdoors. I'm not talking about the outward bound stuff. I'm talking about something really quite different. Okay, so if experiential learning isn't jumping off mountains and hanging on to aerial runways and generally having fun in the outdoors, what is it? Well, to answer that question, I'd like to compare and contrast two very different approaches to learning. One is perhaps the classic way most people understand learning happens, in which an expert or a teacher of one kind or another presents an idea and probably then gives a demonstration, and the different participants observe, watch the demonstration, listen to the exposition, and then try to carry out what they've observed. They try to carry out what they've been watching, and it's understood that this is experiential because it includes the experience of doing it after having watched what they're supposed to do. And obviously, if you compare it with just sitting there listening in a sort of Victorian kind of just sitting and listening to what people have to say, spouting at you kind of way, obviously it's more attractive, it's more lively, it's more involved. But it's also, as we will see later, questionable as regards its actual effectiveness as a way of learning to deal with people. And it may well be okay as a way of learning to deal with other things. That's a different question. When we talk about learning skills for working with people, it's probably not very effective. Now, what I'd like to do is compare that with another way, which is rather than starting with a presentation and a demonstration, you start with experience. Maybe an experience that people haven't actually been told what they're supposed to get out of it, what they're supposed to do with it. They're presented actually with an experience, something which involves exploring something that we don't really know. Not unlike what's actually going to happen in the real world when they deal with real people. They're not actually going to know from the outset what they're up against. Being able to respond flexibly to whatever comes up is obviously a very important point, a very important aspect of learning how to deal with people. So what we're looking at here is a situation in which people start with the experience, maybe even an unknown experience, and together structure that experience into useful working knowledge. It's exactly the other way around. You don't start by being presented with the knowledge and then learn to apply it. You start with the experience and learn to construct together. You learn to build the knowledge together. And that's what we might call experiential learning, as opposed to the first example of the photo, which is more what you might call traditional didactic approach with practice. They're very, very different, and particularly the effectiveness as an approach for learning skills to work with people is radically different. Okay, so let's consider the maybe advantages and disadvantages of each of the two approaches. The kind of experience goes to structure by being created approach, and the structure is given for people to then experience, which is the sort of on a plate kind of approach. And obviously the traditional didactic approach, the on a plate, has one very, very important advantage, which is security, safety. Basically, it's what people understand. Most people have spent a long time learning in exactly that way. From their very earliest infancy, they've probably been used to teachers and others presenting them with ideas and then getting them to practice them. It's standard. And it feels safe. It means that everybody knows what they're supposed to be doing all the time. They know what is correct and what isn't correct, and they can concentrate on getting it right. Now, the problem is that while everybody's concentrating on getting it right, what are they not doing? And of course, one very important answer is they're not exploring. They're not really going beyond the constraints of the actual technique or procedure or whatever it might happen to be that they're trying to follow. Now, if what you're aiming to do is to learn to screw on a nut or a bolt or reproduce exactly a particular procedure, then it's probably a very good way of doing that. It's probably an excellent way of learning basic repetitive techniques. But of course, in this day and age of artificial intelligence, we really don't need to learn that kind of repetition. Most people do it fine, but we've got machines, we've got algorithms, we've got all kinds of ways of doing it much, much, much better than any human being ever could. There is no point in this day and age trying to imitate machines. They can do it better. What, of course, there is a lot of point in doing is doing what machines can't do, which is respond flexibly to whatever comes up. Now, let's think about the other way of going about things. Now, initially, when you present people with an experience and ask them to structure it together, usually, initially, they get a feeling that that's a bit uncomfortable because they don't really know what they're supposed to be doing. And of course, most people have the idea, quite rightly, that they're usually judged and indeed paid for what they know, not for what they don't know, not for what they can explore. And that, of course, can be a problem initially because there's a management issue. It's a question of managing that particular feeling of discomfort. And there may be other feelings of discomfort that come up as well. We can go into how to manage those in another video later on. But maybe the most important thing is that what you're actually learning is a double value. First of all, you will not be treating the person or the people that you're working with as examples of something you've already seen. You'll actually be dealing with them as what they are, unique. Something completely different, something completely new. And even though they may be similar to other people, to other situations, they will be very different. And it's very important to have your sense of professional security connected not to what you know, but to what you can find out. And it's very, very different to learn to find things out and to structure the information into useful working knowledge than to apply knowledge that you already have, that you've already been given. The second tends to lead you to basically trust authority, trust what's already there, trust received wisdom, and so on and so forth. And of course, that was very, very good in the old days. Nowadays, the importance of the agility of being able to think on your feet, to be able to organize information quickly and effectively in response to what's actually happening, not in response to what generally might be happening or to what is similar to what might be happening, but actually to respond to what's there, to what's uniquely and specifically there, is a skill which is absolutely vital in this day and age. In this day and age where a lot of people, a lot of the time, are being presented with situations they've never come across before. And they're probably unlikely to have to come across very often in the future. It's very much a question of being able to respond usefully and appropriately to the things that you may not have seen before. Now, learning that skill requires this double advantage. First of all, of actually dealing with situations as what they are, new. And secondly, constantly practicing constructing information, particularly turning experience into useful working knowledge. And that is a key skill, an absolutely vital key skill for working effectively with people. And it's quite different from throwing procedures, tools and techniques and protocols in their direction in the hope that some of it might work. So there we have it, two different ways of looking at learning, coming from the structure to experiencing it and trying to get it into your experience by practicing, or creating the structure together with other people and then learning to use that. This is a question of actually learning to convert experience into useful knowledge. And that's the key skill that I hope I've been able to point out, to indicate as being useful in this video. In other videos, we'll look at more in detail exactly how to manage this process and of course why it's particularly important in this day and age. Of course, I'm not for a moment suggesting that this can be done anarchically or that it can be done without considerable organisation. And that's really where it's important to have a methodology which is up to the task. One of the big problems, of course, with trying to learn experientially in the past has been exactly that, the lack of a workable methodology. Most people have really tried to do it starting largely from theory, like for example Kolb or Dewey. Now, fortunately, we've got the methodology, developmental behavioural modelling, developed by Scots psychologist John McWhirter. Absolutely invaluable, absolutely priceless. And really, as far as I know, the only effective way of really organising experiential learning so that you can create a way of systematically converting experience into useful working knowledge and a way of applying that knowledge directly. More of that, of course, in other videos. Thanks very much. See you next time.